Cool. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us this morning. Sorry about the delay. As we said backstage, well, kind of over there, if we don't have problems, it doesn't feel real, right? We're going to talk to you today about a couple of things. Let me go back to the title. Have you ever seen a longer title in your life? We really spend time on that. We are going to simplify it a little bit, and we're going to look at, what content strategies are people using to get success with shifting buyer habits, right? So we're going to talk about localization a little bit. To set the scene a bit, we're going to look at global buyer trends and give you the why, right? So we're going to focus on that why bit to make a reason for you all to think this is a problem worth solving, because otherwise it isn't. But first, because you've been waiting quietly and patiently, let's play a little game. Are you ready? We're going to ask you some questions. So have your hands in the air. If you just play a part. Even if you don't know the answer, it's fine. What would you say is the percentage of consumers who've tried new shopping behavior, say in the last 2 years? Hands in the air for 47. Few people, thank you. Hands in the air for 65. A few more, and 75. Okay, what, more 75s? What's the answer, Alex?
So. The answer is 75%.
Okay, seems logical enough. No prizes for that question, unfortunately, but it's hard to know where this would be. These things tend to be moving on the upside, though. Here's another one for you. 73% of this country's consumers who shopped online said they would continue doing that after the crisis passed. Let's say it's passed, okay? Finland, anyone? Few people. Oh, a couple of people. France and Mexico. Okay, so France, Mexico.
Yeah, I think France and Mexico. Well, the surprising part here is that actually that 73% belongs to Finland. And that's where we're trying to start talking about smart localization strategies, because what the pandemic did, it started changing consumer behaviors in countries that we could never think of as the regular suspects of going online or digitalizing even further. But we're going to talk about this. So Finland is the correct answer on this one.
Who got it right? Put your hands back in the air. See, some extra people have put their hands up. Hold on now. Stick to your answer. So that's a flavor of what we're going to go through. One last question for you. Anyone got this answer? Go on, be brave. What did Melissa buy last week? Watch, a diesel purse. That's a Swarovski watch. Gucci shoes. Anyone? The shoes, people like the shoes?
All three, actually, because Melissa loves buying luxury online.
So spring party season is just around the corner, so of course she bought all three. All right, so we're going to have a look a little bit at buyer trends, as Alex has said. First, we want to tell you a love story, all right? And this is, I guess, a different type of love story. And it's about our actor here, and this is a scenario that's played out many, many times. So Melissa here loves buying. And then COVID hit in, and she works in digital, and she couldn't buy what she wanted to buy. So what happened next? Well, I told her she loves buying. You see it? I really like clothes. What happened next? She went online. She went looking for new experiences. And then she found luxury retail experiences that she couldn't find before. So every month she goes in, she buys her watch, her bag, her shoes, and has a positive experience, because the experience is what she's looking for. She can't do it in person. She can't go in store. She has to go online. So what happens after COVID? Well, after COVID, the experience was good enough for her to stay online. And this is what we're going to talk to you about today. It's this idea of ingrained habits, that if you make the experience good enough, people will stay there. So that behavioral uptick is really important. Something we didn't say about her.
We're going to talk about the market again. So what we didn't say is that actually Emilia is based in Romania. And one of the things that happened in Romania, for example, is that when the market started digitizing and accelerating the digitization because of the pandemic, what happened is that it created some sort of a latent market. There was something there that it didn't exist before. What the market gained is visibility of a world in digital that they would otherwise take a longer time to get there, but actually COVID digitized, and then they actually discovered a world that they were having access before. And that's exactly what you're going to go through next.
Yeah, we're going to show you some data. So obviously you can see all of this right here. Yeah, everyone see? Don't worry. We're going to point you to where you can get this. I'll just focus in on this here. What's happening here is this is global adoption acceleration of digital, right? And in 6 months, it went from 36 to 58%, which is massive. That's behavioral. That's a shift in habits completely. There's another one here. And again, don't worry about reading this. We'll get it to you. And this is about the overall stickiness, what we call stickiness. So the willingness for people to stay. So changing customer needs or expectations, 62% say they would stick there. And then finally, this is more for executives who were asked about their mindset for technology. And all of them said, in order to manage those changing habits, we have to have better technology. And we use it because otherwise we can't pivot to the varying habits and we can't scale. So quick summary on this section. You know, lots of little things going on. It's all kind of a mixed pot, if you like. Habit forming has accelerated globally. Watch for the latent market space, and that's where companies have been looking at the Melissas and Amelias of the world, is how can we speak to them because it's latent. You'd be glad to know school is almost over, right? That's enough for the kind of lecturing bit. Who are we? Well, I'm Dave Ruane. I'm marketing director at XTM. XTM is a company, a technology company that enables e-commerce companies to globalize their content, so reach markets by having a translation platform. And as you probably figured out, I'm Irish. If you haven't, I'm Irish. So if you don't understand me, I have an excuse. And Alex is joining me.
Yes. I think this slide came a little bit later, and it's like we should have done that at the beginning. But I'm Alex. I'm the senior head of localization services at a company called Farfetch, which is an online e-commerce luxury marketplace where we sell luxury. And I oversee our localization operations on a global scale.
So we're going to show you some more market data. So I'm going to try and help with the color coding here while you speak.
Sure. Okay. So that's when I take over.
Mexico is pink. All right. So Mexico is the pink line. The red line is France. And then the rest of it we'll explain.
So we talk about Mexico and we talk about France. I think what is important to look here, this is basically, you're talking 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022. And what you see here is basically when the pandemic kicks in, and that's where basically you have that acceleration of digitization across all sorts of different markets. But what we are observing further is exactly what is happening. The ones that you would expect, look at France, for example, digitizing, it's the one at the bottom, digitizing, but not as fast as other markets. And look at Mexico, or look at Saudi Arabia, which is the very bright blue. So the point to make here is that COVID has left a lot of markets in a completely different state. This is not about large not being a massive luxury market. Of course it is, and it will continue being one, but this is a digital space. And I think when you move from physical to digital, the landscape is a little bit different from what we have historically known about how markets and consumers behave in different markets.
And the space we're talking about is luxury retail, so we're narrowing it in. So any of the data that we're showing you, just from now on, is specific to that space. Do you want to talk a little bit, just generally, what's happening?
Sure. So there's a couple of things that are happening. First of all, you have that line that goes up, and then what happened right after that is that some markets stayed there. So that acceleration continued because the consumers found that experience appealing enough for them to keep buying online. Some markets went back. And you're looking into, we're going to observe a couple of them in the next slide, where basically you're looking into those more traditional physical markets that are traditionally harder to penetrate in the online space, that in a certain extent, they actually have gone back. France, for example, there's so much abundance of luxury in the physical space that it's traditionally has been a lot harder to penetrate when it comes to the digital space. Italy, on the other hand, somehow this paradox that equally massive luxury market when it comes to luxury brands, but it digitized and it accelerates and it keeps accelerating. What we are observing there is exactly why is this happening? And when you deep dive a little bit, one of the reasons, and I put some fun facts, it could be that actually the Italian luxury brands, it seems that they're a lot more interested in creating and building digital experiences, which means that it goes back to the first point that we made. This is about experience. This is not about a commodity. It's not about making it easy for people to buy your product. It's how you're taking them through a journey to buy it.
This should be pretty obvious for most people.
100%. Super, super interesting. This is a lot of new data that are coming through. If you have all these markets globally becoming digital, it means that what the consumer needs in those markets changes. So what we're observing now is that English is no longer a predominant language online. This is not about how much English content you have online. There's about 60% of all content globally is in English. However, only 25% of the consumers, they indicate clearly that they prefer to navigate in English. This means that localization matters, language matters on how you're speaking to your consumer. Don't forget, there's 660 million people in India. There's 1 billion people in China that they don't necessarily want to navigate in English.
And if given the choice, people will choose a brand that is giving them the experience they want in their language that's personalized to them. Obvious, right? So here's a framework that we wanted to share with you. It's, you know, if you want to expand your global market presence, that's what it says, Global Expansion Framework. It's from a company called Nimsy Insights, who in our space are a market research arm. And really what they're talking about is, you know, go through all these hoops when you're doing your market research, but now that's accelerating. You can't go slow in that anymore. You have to go really fast because it's pivoting so quickly. We're going to talk a little bit about the how here and how you at Farfetch and the team, you know, made this happen. So we're going to start with deep market research, then look at some foundational practices on what we call localization, the translation side of things, and clustering as well. So Alex, do you want to walk us through that?
Sure. So talking about market research, post-pandemic, there is a behavior that is being observed that actually that one approach fits all globally. It just doesn't cut it anymore for the consumer. This means that saying that this is what I'm selling and selling exactly the same thing in exactly the same way everywhere is just going to end up stagnating your performance. And and you're observing that a lot happening, especially post-pandemic. So this is where you need to go deep into your market research. You need to realize that we have a couple of examples later, but you need to start thinking, if I'm selling this in the UK, if I'm going to do exactly the same experience on the other side of the world, are they going to perceive it in exactly the same way? Just because the Americans buy in this behavior, why do we generalize it? And I think that's where you need to start understanding your markets better and start understanding what it's going to make your consumer click. The second one is around foundational localization practices. It's going to sound crazy, but it can start with very simple things. Localize your website. Provide languages that your consumers speak depending on where you want to target. English is not enough, as we just talked about. So that is going to allow you to jump into this simple way of talking about personalization. Everybody talks about personalization. You can't personalize if your consumer is Chinese and you're trying to target them in English. They're not going to feel that you care about them. And that's where you go into the localization practices. And eventually, once you do those two, and you understand those two are foundational in starting your expansion, start clustering, because regional matters as well. You have regional behaviors that are very important to know and understand what makes regions tick, what makes markets tick better than others.
And this bedrock is absolutely essential. Technology-wise, we're a technology provider, we're in this space, but having that as your core beating heart is an absolute necessity, which we'll talk about in a second. I have another question for you. So how many of you, let's say someone in your company has said, let's translate, let's go global. How many of you have seen pushback in your organization? Yeah, a couple of people. How many of you have been the pushback? Oh, over there, well done. Brave person over here. Yeah, we like that. But that's part of what happens, right? It's a cost center. It's, oh, what are we going to get out of it? Let's low hit. Can we go through English proficiency you saw on a previous slide there? By the way, another Google search for you. EPI, if I can get the acronym right. EPI, search for EPI, English proficiency. It's a good record of how countries are doing with their English proficiency. Who's number one at the moment on the index? Anyone? Which country has the most English proficiency? Hint, it's European. Holland is top this year, followed by Austria, followed by the Nordics. Germany is in 10th position, by the way, just saying. Of course, not all of you, right?
I also know that Italy has one of the lowest English proficiency percentages in Europe. That's surprising, isn't it? So knowing that, that matters.
Portugal is fairly high. It's actually just above Germany, sorry again. Spain is low as well. So important stuff. So TMS at the center enables you to build on top of that tech stack. So that tech stack can work with content repositories. We're going to talk about how you at Farfetch have evolved even further. So you had those things in place. You then built in programs like this.
That's right. So the message here is that it doesn't have to be hard to localize your website. There is so much technology out there that can get you very fast from point A to point B. Point A is where you start and you're creating your content, all the way to point B where you're basically reaching your consumer. We have what you call the circular localization workflows. You have to think that actually there are mechanisms available right now in technologies that the moment you push your content through, you can actually take it into a circular flow and then deliver it very fast and very efficiently with good quality as well. If I told you, for example, that probably 25, 30, 40% to some extent of your content is repeated, and those systems are able to identify that, and they're able to get it very fast and very efficiently, it's not a daunting task to localize your website. You just need to take a leap of faith and jump right into it. We have a program called the Language Genius at Farfetch, and this is basically, imagine a series of tech initiatives where we basically plug in technology where is needed, localization technology that is, where is needed, that is going to help us to push very efficiently content out. We produce yearly about 2.5 billion words across 16 languages, and we service more than 50 markets at the moment with localized content. We do that. You have to imagine, do the math in terms of how much content that is on a daily basis, right? Now, if you're worrying that your 5, 10, 15 pages online are going to be hard to localize, think again. I think you just need the right technology to put in place. So this is the Language Genius for us, and it's definitely a genius for us because it's solving a lot of problems.
Well, the genius came up with the name, I think. Like, I loved the brand names you have on these initiatives, but I think, you know, joking aside, it really is evolved localization, and you've even turned it into a profit center as well, right?
That's right.
So look, we're going to start talking a little bit about benefits before we wrap here and go to questions. So there's a number of them. We've just picked 3, right, Alex? So personalization, bathing suits in winter. What's all that about?
Well, imagine it's summer. Actually, no, winter. Imagine it's winter. Sorry. Imagine it's winter, right? And then you go to your local shops and all they have Imagine you walk into your store and all they have available for you is bathing suits. How many of you have experienced this online? Maybe you haven't, but if you're into the fashion side of things, all I can tell you is that this is what happens in winter in Australia for the vast majority of retailers online. Because the seasonality is very North Hemisphere. That's the problem in seasonality in terms of fashion. So what we're pushing out spring dresses, for example, and in Australia, it's like winter or autumn, right? So if you're not going to want to see it in the physical space, then you shouldn't be seeing it in the online space either. And that's the personalization and that localization that we're talking about.
And hyperdomination was something we discussed when we were preparing this. And really what it means is that you are able to take first mover advantage on markets. And as a result, if your experience is right, people will stay. The stickiness is very high. And then other brands catch up. The laggards, if you look at the bell curve of adoption, they might add in later, but they're not going to catch up because your experience is so good.
100%. You're looking into an opportunity now that you have that latent market that we're talking about, that digital space. Imagine the first time that the smartphones started coming out. It was a huge market, how quickly that picked up. There is an opportunity. If we do it right, then you could potentially hyper-dominate. And this is exactly the testing that we were doing from that northern hemisphere compared to the southern hemisphere. We don't understand that Australia is a huge market, for example, to target, but are we targeting it the same and the right way as we do in the northern hemisphere? We've had instances where we're observing that if you localize properly your product in Australia, the engagement rate can go up to 80%. And this is very, very new data for us that we are observing at the moment. And that's exactly the point we're trying to make today in terms of smart localization around the world.
Indeed. And just quick sum up for you. Buyer trends are sticky. There's been a real behavioral shift. So if you don't know that, look into it. You'd be interested in what you find out. We were. Technology evolution is essential to be able to pivot. So if you don't have your tech stacks in really good shape, pivoting to different markets. You saw the different behaviors across just 3 or 4 markets. Imagine that in 20, 30, or 50. Baseline tech, like a translation management system, when you're talking about localization, is a basic need now. It's no longer a nice to have. Different markets, as we said, have the need to have a different solution set. Customers can buy now from anywhere. They want experiences they can trust, so that needs to be consistent across all touch points in the customer journey. Are you doing this, anyone? When your execs say go, are you ready? Well, if not, come talk to us. Ask us your questions afterwards. We're XTM, we're at the booth. Keep going that way, a couple of roads, and turn left. We're down in the opposite corner, D2.4 in this hall. And if we have time, we'll take questions. Thank you.
Hello, does anybody have a question still? Oh, okay, one. One person is not shy, at least.
Hello. Thanks for the presentations, very interesting. So the problem statement was very well elaborated. It's very clear, the importance of localizing the content. But in terms of your solution, does it go beyond translation? Or is it just simply translating the original content to the language of choice?
So the question is around, do you just provide the translation or do you need to go beyond that, right? You absolutely need to go beyond that. I think in the clustering that you create, one of the things that you can do is identify which markets they need a little bit less than going full-blown localization. And I'm talking about imagery, we're talking about the video, you're talking about the creative could potentially be different as well. The difference between Netherlands and China is vast. China needs a lot more localized experience that you're giving them exactly what the consumer needs. There is a pull and a push, as we tend to call them. You pull from the consumer what they need, and you need to identify and respond to that. There is a push in terms of actually, what is it that I want to push as well? So definitely, there are markets that you 100% need to go further, for sure.
Cool.
Could you also provide us some examples of the experience that could, or the different experiences that you need to provide to people? For example, like in Germany and Romania, which are kind of close, but not that much, you know, for a luxury brand.
I think from examples, I mean, I can only talk about the experience that, you know, about Farfetch in this case, right? So when you're looking into, I think the example of the bathing suits, for example, between the two markets that sit in different hemispheres, so that's definitely one of them. If you're talking about more Europe, I think there is an overall clustering in Europe that is important. I think you still need to look into where those, I don't consider that in the luxury space, you're going to have huge differences between Romania and Germany.
You've done loads of A/B testing in markets, though, haven't you? And you found that, you know, you saw one of the pages there, and go up to farfetch.com, you'll see lots of examples of you moved after A/B testing, you got rid of a panel, plugged in another one, tested that. So different markets produced telemetry results to tell you what should be in there, right?
Yeah, I think the question was on specifically Romania and Germany, right? So or it could be any of those. I think you need to consider, for example, whether in your northern Nordics are probably going to be a lot more interested during winter for boots or, you know, anything that more jackets or coats, when actually highly likely in southern Spain, the weather is still sunny and warm.
Well,
and that's the difference between the two.
Interrupting you here, Alex, but you've also done something really cool by having campaigns that were really culturally, locally interesting. So Ramadan, you have specific campaigns.
Absolutely, like you go into, you know, we run Ramadan campaigns in the Middle East for 12 to 15 weeks, and actually vast majority of our engagement in the region for that period of time is through those campaigns. And that's the difference. You don't need to run, you know, Ramadan campaigns in Europe because what's your audience there compared to what you do in the Middle East. So that's another difference in terms of examples of what you do differently as well.
We'd be happy to talk more on those and other questions. We better give the mic back for the next session, because people are wondering when they come in, what's going on still? We are running a little late, folks. So again, thank you. Thanks for your time.